final word in sports all across the state. You're listening to Sports Talk with your hosts, Bill Kornbluth, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. You've been waiting all day, so join the show now by calling 800-956-7266.
Dante Grantham's going to get a little bit more of a chance to emerge, have more plays run for him. Gabe DeVoe, as senior, is going to have opportunities to do more things. The ball will be in his hands a little bit more to do more. Shelton and Marquise certainly, I think, will build upon what was a very good first year for them.
I will not be surprised if another team that has never made that run makes that run. I read somewhere where every team in our league has made a Sweet 16 since '96. Ooh, that's pretty good.
Welcome on in to Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Willie P here with you, back from Nashville, survived, back from the Nash Vegas, in for basically everybody today. Yours truly and Brian Leonard are the only ones in the building. We have no Pro, we have no Corn, but we do have 2 hours of sports talk for you inside the Palmetto State. What we also have is some background noise behind me that you might hear bleeding through every once in a while, as there is a concert here on Main Street in Columbia, South Carolina, just outside of our studios. And the old architecture of the Behringer building, unfortunately, not able to block all of it out. But we will at least keep you entertained behind all of that, and also get you ready for a great weekend of high school football, a great night of high school football. David Shelton's going to join us in a baker's dozen of minutes to go over a big game in the Midlands and, of course, some great ones across the state as we head to the penultimate week of the regular season as we get ready for playoffs here in the state of South Carolina. It is the bye week for South Carolina and Clemson, so don't you worry. But there is some news of note regarding Clemson. Apparently, they thought that they were in a Brad Pitt movie in the 90s. Because apparently there might have been a fight club going on at Clemson, or at least a fight club style video that was leaked out by somebody on the team and hit social media yesterday. According to the athletic department, they've addressed it. We talked about it last night on the show, but basically Dabo Swinney has addressed that and will at least release that to the media from that perspective. We do have a couple of commitments that we are awaiting on. Looks like Jericho Helms has committed to North Carolina State, according to at least all who are keeping track of him. He's a 6'7" forward, big target from South Carolina, but he has said on his Twitter account that he is going to be a member of the Wolfpack. He said, basically, in a statement, I'd like to thank God for the opportunity to be in this position. Also, I'd like to thank Mom and Dad for supporting me through everything. Furthermore, I'd like to thank the Chaminade coaches, faculty, and staff for their support. But he said he's committing to NC State. He commits to NC State over South Carolina, Missouri, and others. He only took official visits to both South Carolina and NC State. He's out of St. Louis, out of Chaminade High School, a private school there in St. Louis. And so he goes to NC State. Also, a big Clemson target ends up going as well to Florida, as Richard Goreja, the Haitian sensation, will be a Florida Gator instead of being a Clemson Tiger. So a lot of recruiting news on this weekend. And again, a bye weekend for both Clemson and South Carolina, so a lot of recruiting will be done. We'll bring you a lot of that recruiting segment coming up later on in the program. Also, we have a football filibuster Friday. Governor Hodges and also Attorney General Alan Wilson will join us coming up at the bottom of this hour to go over their picks. Again, they don't have Clemson or South Carolina to pick this week, but we will at least hear from them in that regard. As we said, David Shelton coming up at 6:20. Monty Dutton about an hour and a half from now. And also about an hour from now, we're going to talk to a guy who's expecting. He and his lovely wife, Peter Burns, are expecting their next child, I guess you could say. And he is, of course, of the SEC network, but he took some time out of his busy schedule to join us, and he will talk to us coming up at 7:06. Phone lines to get in. We will take a couple if we can. 800-956-7266 is the phone number. Your thoughts on where, after 7 games, Clemson and South Carolina are. Listen, we could talk about the Syracuse loss till we're blue in the face. We could talk about Kelly Bryant until we're blue in the face. Simple fact is, Clemson sitting where they are right now, they win out, they're in the playoff. That's basically what you have to at least put your mind on. You got a mulligan last year in Pittsburgh. You get a mulligan this year with Syracuse. You basically have eliminated your margin for error. You get Georgia Tech in next week. That is obviously a very big measuring stick when it comes to what you have left as far as mental toughness for the rest of the season, because you're going to have NC State. You're going to have Florida State. Those are two very, very big tests. And again, the next 3 weeks for both of these teams will really show how big their medal is. South Carolina has 3 games. 2 of them they should be favored in, and 1 that, of course, they will be a decided underdog in that middle contest when they take on Georgia. But I think, next week is okay. How prepared are you to fulfill this final stretch? South Carolina should beat Vanderbilt. Clemson should beat Georgia Tech. But the following week for both is the last little bit measuring stick. South Carolina is not going to beat Georgia, I don't think. That's going to be a very, very tough game to win. I don't think it's very fair to expect you to go down to Athens and win that contest. Not saying it's completely impossible, but Georgia is playing head and shoulders better than anybody in the SEC East right now, and the only team in the SEC that can say that they're better than them right now is the Alabama Crimson Tide, who have basically shown that they're taking on all comers on this, what is basically their revenge tour from their loss to Clemson last year. As far as the Tigers go, that NC State contest looms so much larger now after the loss to Syracuse than it did before. And NC State's only lunch comes to the aforementioned South Carolina Gamecocks. And you're looking at a situation, too, in South Carolina, in Clemson's case, in that you don't know the health and status of Kelly Bryant, at least at this point. We won't really know about him until we talk to Dabo Swinney for the first time on Talking Tuesday next week, or when we talk to the coordinators on Monday. So in that regard, you really have to wonder just exactly where his mind is, where his ankle is, and also whether or not he's a little gun-shy off of taking off he took against Syracuse. I was at SEC Basketball Media Days on Wednesday and Thursday, and it's interesting looking at the SEC top to bottom. There's a lot of bullish nature when it comes to this league. A lot of the coaches seem to believe that this is a conference that can get 6 or 7 teams into the NCAA tournament. I just don't know which teams from the ACC you're taking out, or the Big 12, or the Big East. I know that there are a lot of people who expect things of this league that are grander in nature than they've been in the past. You just have to show it to me in the non-conference, and that's the part of this too. Is that it's not like you're going to be able to make any kind of large, measured statement. And the other part of this too is that if you do have a lot of teams that are close together, bunched together in great nature in this league, the way you build a league is you have to be able to build separation. And if the SEC cannot build separation, if there's a lot of parity, if we're seeing teams go, 10-8 in conference and 9-9, 11-7, then that really isn't going to help people across the landscape of college basketball, because then you're only going to be able to get 4 or 5 teams in the NCAA tournament. And last year did a heck of a lot for the SEC. It absolutely did, because you were able to get a team that was not named Florida or Kentucky into the Final Four in South Carolina. I don't know if there's going to be another team that can make that type of run, but you need to be able to prove to those in college basketball that there is not just this Florida and Kentucky, glass ceiling, and then there's the rest of, basically the rest of it is some kind of good teams and then also rans. You're going to need to see teams like Texas A&M and Missouri step up. You're going to have to see South Carolina, quite honestly, maintain what they built last year. And the media did not look upon them very kindly. They were picked 11th out of 14. Frank Martin says he doesn't care about polls, but the polls are reflective in nature of the fact that you're basically going to have to groom a guy who hasn't played point at the collegiate level and Hassani Gravett into that level. You're going to have Kotsar and Silva be big contributors on the interior, and you're going to have Corey Holden be that kind of special player that everyone thinks he is, coming in, having practiced with the team, and then obviously having sat out. So in that nature and in that regard, South Carolina has an uphill battle. They don't necessarily have a big test in the non-conference season to be able to really test them and build up their RPI. They're going to have to do their work in the conference season in order to show out, and Clemson will have to do the same thing as well, as they will have to replace some very big superstars on that level as well. We'll talk more about that a little bit later on in the program. It is week 9 of the high school football season. David Shelton from the Post and Courier and the High School Sports Report will join us. A big game in the Midlands that we will break down coming up next on Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network.
This is the place to talk Tigers, Gamecocks, and more. Sports talk across the state on the South Carolina Radio Network.
The and more part will be very much in tune right now. Pologic here with you on our Friday edition of Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. It is now time for our Friday edition of the High School Sports Report, which is brought to you by South Carolina Farm Bureau Insurance. With new auto insurance rates from Farm Bureau Insurance, you could be saving a whole lot of money, even if you've received a quote before. Rates now more competitive than ever. Get a no-obligation quote today at favrates.com. David Shelton from the Post and Courier and the High School Sports Report is joining us. We have to start, David, obviously, with the big game in 5A, Dutch Fork and Spring Valley. That's the one that I think everyone's kind of circled on their calendar. What are you expecting tonight in this contest?
Well, I expect a very good game. I expect a big crowd, a lot of intensity. Dutch Fork's got one loss. Spring Valley hadn't lost. They're both in the top 4 in the rankings in 5A. So it's for a region title, which will lean down the road, home field advantage throughout the playoffs. So it's got a lot of interest and a lot of importance. I think it's as I've said a couple times on different shows, it may be the biggest game in the Midlands in some time. Now, there have been some big games in recent years, especially since Dutch Fork's gotten really good. But Spring Valley is bringing a different kind of offensive look, although I still like Dutch Fork. I think they're going to win the game. I trust their defense just a little more. But it's going to be a heck of a game. I think it could be really close.
Would it be fair to say that Spring Valley at least has the ability, or at least would stand in the most precarious position from, getting to that undefeated regular season mark out of the 3 undefeateds in 5A?
Yeah, I mean, if they get through tonight, they're going to finish the regular season undefeated. I think Fort Dorchester is probably that makes sense, but I think they're going to finish undefeated in the regular season. And Dutch Fork obviously has the one loss. Teal-Hanna, I think, is going to finish undefeated. I thought when they got past their early test, Westside next week, Westside Teal-Hanna, that's a big rivalry. So I guess you could say that one could be a toss-up, although I think Teal-Hanna is clearly the best team. And so I would think that they're probably got a pretty good shot to finish undefeated as well.
I'm looking at some of the other games in 5A, Burns at Gaffney, Spartanburg at Boiling Springs, Conway at Sumter. Any of these games, I mean, Conway-Sumter, obviously a big one with 2 ranked teams as well. Would you say that that'd be the other one that could possibly be a stumbling block for ranked teams basically this week?
Yeah, I think that's probably the next best game in 5A. I mean, the other ones you mentioned are going to be really good games because they're good rivalries. Burns Gaffney, I mean, that goes forever. Mm-hmm. But I think the Conway-Sumter game is very important because it's going to give one of them a region title, which is going to put them, up high in the brackets. Now, at some point, either one of those teams is going to have to hit Spring Valley, Dutch Fork, or Fort Dorchester in the playoffs, but you still want to be the number 1 seed and position yourself right to maybe avoid Fort Dorchester until later down in the playoffs. Now, I think Sumter's defense is better than Conway's, but Conway's offense I think is better. So I kind of lean towards Conway winning that game. I'm not sure why. I was thinking Sumter the whole week, but something tells me this Conway team is got what it takes. I think they're going to be a legitimate state title or lower state title contender. Again, the lower state is loaded, but I think they're going to be one of the ones that you see around the end of November still playing.
If there's ever been a sneaky 7-1, I think it belongs to kind of Belton Honeypath, and they get a real test going to Wren this week. That's a game that obviously has big implications in that contest. How do you see that one playing out?
Yeah, I like the Bears. I like Belton Honeypath. I think Wren has got a pretty good offense, but they've given up some points at times. They almost get into that we're going to outscore you mode, and I think Belton Honeypath's got a good enough defense to kind of limit Wren. Although I think there'll be some points scored. I mean, it's going to be the winner's going to get probably in the 30s. It's just a matter of how close it is on the final total. But I definitely feel like Belton Honeypath, like you said, kind of a quiet 7-1. and like Greer, Greer's kind of beaten a couple of undefeated teams. A lot of people are, the reason they're quiet is because South Point's in the upper state.
True.
And you just don't see, I mean, you just can't fathom anybody beating South Point in 4A in the upper state. So, they get all the attention and they deserve it. They're very good. But then you got teams like BHP and Greer who are pretty darn good. And we'll have to see where once we get into November into the playoffs, we'll have to see what happens. But South Point is definitely worthy of all the accolades and attention they're getting in 4A.
David Shelton of the Post and Courier joining us here, our high school sports report on a Friday night. Of course, our high school sports scoreboards at 10, 10:30, and 11 o'clock tonight here on many of these same South Carolina Radio Network affiliates. You mentioned South Point. Are we at the point, pardon the pun, where it's starting to almost get unfair for them?
Yeah. I mean, they're really good on both sides of the ball. Not to mention they have probably the best kicker in the Southeast in VT Potter. So I think they're, I mean, they could stumble. I mean, you got to remember we're dealing with 16 to 18-year-olds. So, girlfriend breaks up with you on Friday afternoon, you can have a bad Friday night and your team loses. But coaches make that joke all the time. But I think a determined and focused Boiling Springs, I mean, South Point is gonna beat everybody they play. If they don't have mental letdowns or just crazy injuries or something, I've said it, they may be the best team in South Carolina. Fort Dorchester people love it when I say that, but they may well be, and we'll never know. But people say Chapman last night looked like the best team in South Carolina. So it's funny that we can all make a statement for one certain team. I just think, Chapman may not play great defense, but they got one of the best quarterbacks and a great running back and great receivers. But South Point's got all those plus a great defense. So that's why I would give them the edge.
Yeah, you kind of beat me to the punch with the Chapman final from yesterday over Newberry. How impressed were you with that showing?
Well, I thought they were going to win. But I thought it would be high scoring. I just wasn't sure if Newberry could keep up, and as it turns out, they couldn't. They have a great running back in Amir Abrams, had over 300 yards rushing last night. And they still lost. But the thing about Chapman is they have more than one guy. They have Colton Bailey. They have Richard Tucker. They have DJ Twitty as a running back who had a great game last night. They've got Fongsat, who's another receiver. The one thing you worry about Chapman is, and it may be because they rely so much on their offense, they score so many points. Maybe the defense doesn't play as hard sometimes, but they have given up some points, and they'll give up some points to some really good teams. But you got to outscore those cats, and really they're on fire right now offensively. And
3A also, another ranked-on-ranked matchup, Chester and Fairfield Central. That's obviously two teams undefeated in region play, and very, very big part of that game as well.
Oh, absolutely. Fairfield's kind of ruled the roost over there, but just Chester team, Victor Floyd's got him a really talented offensive group. I think Chester can win this game, and I think Chester, I put out a little tweet today about my top 3A in the upper state were Chapman, Newberry, and Chester. Now, because I put that on Chester, they'll probably lose tonight. But I feel like those are the three best teams in 3A, with Chapman being a little bit above everybody else. But Chester's got some weapons, and that'll be an interesting game tonight.
Real quick, can you tell me anything about this kicker that Clemson basically took as a walk-on from Bishop England?
Yeah, Drew Costa. I remember covering him a couple years ago. He kicked a lot of field goals in high school, but his percentage was not great.
It wasn't.
He was under 50%, but he did kick a lot of field goals.
Yeah. So it's a hard thing when you lose a guy who could be an all-conference level kicker, and you have to replace him with guys who are not used to kicking at that level. But we'll see what he can do, whether he takes over for Alex Spence or not. David Shelton from the High School Sports Report. We'll talk to you tonight, David. Thanks so much for the stuff today.
Okay, Will.
And David Shelton joins us courtesy again of the Farm Bureau Insurance. Favorites.com for that. Our football filibuster is next. Governor Hodges, Attorney General Alan Wilson, next on Sports Talk. Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network. Will Pelagic here with you, and for the assembled crew we usually bring to you on a daily basis. They left me alone with the keys to the car again, so I'm going to drive it the way that they want to, but I might wreck it. Hope you're enjoying yourself on this Friday. It is our pleasure to welcome in the former governor of the state of South Carolina, Jim Hodges, and the Attorney General, Alan Wilson, for our weekly segment, our football filibuster is what we call it. Gentlemen, good evening to you.
Good evening.
I understand, Attorney General Wilson, you are out camping, as I hear it.
That's right. I'm with my little boy, Michael, and we're on our way to a Cub Scout camping trip this weekend up in Chester State Park.
You know, my dad and I had some of our best moments together camping as the Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts. He only is mad, though, that I took him on all of the trips that required use of a latrine and not the ones that had running water and showers. So I hope that that your son has done the same for you.
Yes, I think we're going to have some facilities on this trip, but I understand that the next one will be a little bit more out in the wilderness.
More native, so to speak?
A little bit more native, that's right.
Let's get to the records here. Governor Hodges, you have a 2-game lead on Attorney General Wilson, so we give you at least the first opportunity to start with our opening week, our opening game of the week. You both went 3-2 last week. Our first game, Southern Cal at Notre Dame. Notre Dame with a 3.5-point favorite amongst them. Governor, who do you like in this matchup of Titans in South Bend?
I like Notre Dame. I think they're starting to play pretty well, and I believe that they'll cover. I believe they'll cover. They'll beat them by 6 points.
And Attorney General Wilson, your thoughts on the Irish and the Trojans?
Well, I'm looking at the history here, and Southern Cal is 0-5 against the spread in the last 5 games, and I'm also with the governor, liking the way Notre Dame's playing, so I'm with the Irish.
Look at Attorney General Alan Wilson bringing the noise and the knowledge with a little research. I like it. I like where the head's at. We move to the ACC. Syracuse at Miami. The Orange coming off of that upset victory over Clemson, having to go to Miami and face a Hurricane team that is a 17-point favorite. Attorney General Alan Wilson, you're up first.
I went back and forth on this one. I really have, and I've struggled with it because Syracuse really stepped up against an amazing Clemson program. But I'm going to put my money right now that Syracuse is still a little hungover from the Clemson after party, and they're going to go down there in that Miami heat, and I think Miami is going to really sting them. So I'm going to go with Miami. I know it's a lot of points, but I'm going to go with Miami covering this one.
Governor Hodges, is the heat on in Miami, or the Orange continue to roll?
It is midnight Cinderella. Miami is going to kill them. Syracuse, that's a rude awakening for Cinderella.
What did you all think of that game up with Clemson? I mean, it was just such a weird contest.
It was a strange. It was like the perfect storm for Syracuse. Nothing could go wrong, and they looked like a dramatically different team. And obviously, with the quarterback out, Clemson was a different team.
They certainly were. This game up next, I'm having a hard time racking my head around this line. Mississippi State is hosting Kentucky, and it's a 12-point favorite in favor of the Bulldogs. Kentucky's look good, only one loss on the season. Governor, your thoughts on this contest between the Wildcats and Bulldogs in South Mississippi?
Kentucky seems to play up or down to their competition, say the Carolina game. I just think it's too many points. I'm going to take Kentucky, keeping it a little closer. I think Mississippi State will win, but it'll be less than a touchdown.
That's the place where I went to. How about you, Attorney General Alan Wilson?
You know, there's no way I'm going to be able to catch the governor if we keep agreeing like this. I don't want Kentucky to win because obviously I need them to lose for Carolina in the SEC East. But I'm with the governor. I do think Kentucky will lose, but I think it'll be within 12. So I'm going to go with Kentucky covering the spread.
Now to say, you guys can't keep agreeing like this. You are on opposite sides of the aisle. Yes, this is a thing, right?
Hey, you can, when you're in the lead, you can agree all you want.
I like it. I like where your head's at, Governor. Louisville at Florida State. This Florida State team, obviously another week of experience for James Blackman. They get Louisville coming to Tallahassee. A 7-point favorite are the Seminoles. Attorney General Alan Wilson, you are first up.
listen, Louisville gave up 45 points last week to Boston College at home. I think Florida State can cover this one, so I'm going to pick Florida State to cover against Louisville.
Wilson likes the Noles, Governor Hodges. How do you feel?
I'm going to take Louisville and the points on this. I think their offense
thank you.
is too good. I think their offense is too good. I think Florida State's too inconsistent. So I'll take the points.
Yeah, that young quarterback, I'm very curious to see how much he's matured on his way, especially when they have that game against Clemson at Death Valley coming up here in a couple of weeks. That's going to be kind of the last circle on Clemson's schedule before the Palmetto Showdown coming up here at the end of the year. Last one, Tennessee at Alabama. The spread is 36. I was in Knoxville a couple of days ago on my way to Nashville. I checked out Butch Jones's house. It's still standing, but it might not be in his name for very long. Governor Hodges, how do you feel about this contest with Tennessee and Alabama?
Well, Butch will be downsizing very soon from the nice home he has to something much more modest. I still think that Tennessee, I think it's too many points. And while Alabama will win it big, I think I'm going to take Tennessee in the points.
Last one for you, Mr. Wilson. How do you feel?
Well, first off, is there a for sale sign in Butch's house? Because that might affect how I go on this one.
The natives seem to think it's last chance to dance for him.
Yeah, I agree with the governor that's a lot of points, but and I'm glad we're going to deviate on this one because I need to try to catch him. I think Alabama needs to make a statement because if Georgia can beat Tennessee 41-0, then I think Bama feels like they're going to have to cover this one. So I think they're going to want to send a message not only to Tennessee, but one to Georgia in the East. So I'm going to go with Alabama for the point.
Understand it.
Since they'll be playing probably in the SEC championship.
So let's recap. You both have Notre Dame to go 3.5 over Southern Cal, Miami minus 17 over Syracuse, Kentucky plus 12 over Mississippi State, Florida State for Attorney General Alan Wilson, Louisville for Governor Hodges. He has Tennessee. And Attorney General Wilson, you have Alabama. Time for amendments. I start with the governor. Do you have anything you wish to amend on this Friday?
None for me.
Attorney General Alan Wilson, you, sir?
No guts, no glory. I'm going to hold and hopefully pick off a couple here this coming week.
Last one for you both. South Carolina's next 3-game stretch. They're home Vanderbilt, at Georgia, home Florida. I'll start with the governor. What is their record in that stretch?
2-1.
You, Attorney General Alan Wilson, how do you feel?
2-1.
2-1 as well. So you at least have them becoming bowl eligible within the next couple of weeks. And the last one, does Clemson run the table in the regular season? Attorney General Alan Wilson.
I don't know. It depends on the quarterback. And I just don't know how healthy he is. I don't think so, but it's possible. But I don't think so.
11-1 Clemson, Governor Hodges. You get the last word. Do you have it or no?
No. I think they lose one more game. Don't they play NC State?
They play NC State at NC State here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. I think that's going to be a tough game, particularly if their quarterback hobbled. They're just a different team when he's not playing. And I think they're a really good team, but they need him to be playing and healthy, and I'm just not sure he's going to be that well at that time.
Well, if Governor Hodges doesn't hit on either of his and Alan Wilson hits on the two that you deviate, we could have a tie score after 7 weeks of this thing, or after 8 weeks of this thing, excuse me. But obviously, we have a lot to watch over the course of this week. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and talent, and we'll talk to you next week.
Have a good night.
And thank you so much, both of you. And again, we wish General Wilson the best on that camping trip with his son. We'll come back and get our professional help with Lee Sterling, and we'll reveal our picks as well as we continue on Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Also recruiting coming up, a couple commits involved as well, and a lot more still to come as we continue on a Friday night. Will Pelagic here with you, Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network.
These guys, they never sleep. Check them out on the web at SportsTalkSC.com. Now, more of Sports Talk on the South Carolina Radio Network.
Final segment of Hour 1 here as we continue on Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. It's time for our professional help. Our good friend Lee Sterling is on the line with us, ParamountSports.com. Last week went 2-2 with the games that he shares with us, and a very big game of the week upcoming this week. Lee, how are you this afternoon, evening?
Good. I guess you drew the short straw, huh?
On the bye week, yeah.
Yeah.
Corn takes off Friday of the bye week and leaves us alone here to pick up the pieces. It's okay, though.
You know what it says when you get to the bye week? It usually says new guy.
Yeah. That's what happens. That's all what happens. Last week, again, you went 2-2. We will start out with Notre Dame and Southern Cal. This one, a 3-point line in favor of the Irish. How do you see it?
Well, I think USC's good and they can run football, but Notre Dame does it just a little bit better. They have gained at least 330 yards in 4 of the 6 games this year. In tight games, you want to get those takeaways. Notre Dame, 14 of them this year in 6 games, and they're +7 in turnover ratio. I'm just watching Sam Darnold, and when I see him with his receivers, there's just the body language is not good. Last year, you would watch them against Washington or the Penn State game, and they just seem to really connect, and not the case this year. And they've also struggled a lot on the road. USC had trouble at Cal. They lost at Washington State. They're 10-19 on the road the last 6 years, and they've also had trouble with an active and a mobile quarterback, and not many of those in the Pac-12, and Notre Dame has one in Wimbush here. I think Notre Dame's going to get the revenge for last year's 45-27 loss. I'm going to take the Fighting Irish here, 38-24.
Penn State and Michigan. Happy Valley will be rocking. Saquon Barkley, Heisman Trophy candidate. How do you see this one between the Nittany Lions and the Wolverines?
Yeah, it's fun that, this week we can look at some teams we don't normally get a chance to go over, and some of these teams, and Notre Dame and USC, they could get back into the national championship picture. Penn State sitting at number 2, but when I look at Penn State, I see a good team. I don't see a number 2 ranked team. I'm not blown away by this team. One of the keys I look for in handicapping, you give me a top flight defense, you give me almost double digits, I'm going to take it every time. And this game is the line's 9.5 to 10 points. Last 3 times Michigan's played Penn State's only gotten an average of 13 points per game, only averaging a minuscule 204 yards per game in those 3 games here. And Penn State really hasn't played anyone, while Michigan's already played Michigan State and Florida. I think Penn State's going to win 23-20, but I'm going to take the 9.5 to 10 in Michigan.
Undefeated Miami takes on a Syracuse team that beat the defending national champions last week. What say you about this game where the line you have listed is 15?
Yeah, I've been tapped in really well with Miami this year. So we said that they'd win the game by 4 over Florida State, and they win that and cover by 4. We said they'd win the game by 2 last week. They win by 1. I think that this is a trap line here. This line opened at 14.5. It's up to 17 points, and they're begging you to play Syracuse here. Now, Syracuse has a good offense, but the only 2 really positions this Miami team has depth is defensive line and linebacker. So they can rotate, 2 sets of linemen and linebackers with very little downtick there. So I think Miami's going to be fine there. Also, maybe the biggest part in the problem for Syracuse, they're expecting it's going to be like 86 degrees, and they said with the humidity it's going to feel like 98 there. So these Syracuse kids might wilt in the second half. Also, Syracuse D, no takeaways. Last 3 games here. I think Miami pulls away late, 41-21.
Your final game is inside the Shield, and, of course, it's the rematch of Super Bowl 51. New England and Atlanta. The Patriots a 3-point favorite. Of course, Atlanta blew the big lead in the Super Bowl. How do you see this one?
Yeah, and last week, how do you blow a 17-0 lead at halftime to Miami? That was inexcusable. They must have been looking ahead to the New England game. I'm looking at this New England team in the offseason. I'll look at 3 games from every team in the NFL and college football, and I'm grading New England's players. And, Edelman's good. Gronk, when he's healthy, very good, top 2 through top 3. Tom Brady, probably still the best, he and Aaron Rodgers. But after that, there's not a lot of players that I really would want in my team. So you see what's happening now. They're the only team in the NFL that surrendered more than 400 yards a game on defense or DBs, not making plays in space, offensive line problems here. I don't think they can cover Devonta Freeman out of the backfield here. I like Atlanta 30-24.
Last one, your game of the week involves Auburn. Tell folks how you can get your big pick of the week.
This is an interesting game. Auburn needs to come back and play a second half after last week. I'm sure practices were he wasn't too friendly to the players this week. They worked probably really hard. And Arkansas, are they a team that's got something left, or do they quit? So you want to get involved with this game, we'll give it to you for free. 800-400-9741. Well, we've won 7 of the last 8 weeks in college and pro football. I have my world's famous Baker's Dozen this week. 13 games, just $97. And if we don't have a winning week, you'll get next week for free. Baker's Dozen, 13 games, $97. It's all available, ParamountSports.com.
Lee Sterling joining us, ParamountSports.com. We'll talk to you next week, Lee. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Paul.
And he joins us again here on Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Allow me to do recruiting. Cade Mays of Knoxville, hunting duck this weekend in Canada. Of course, he's a Clemson target along with 4 others. His top 5, Clemson, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Georgia. He'll be in next week on an unofficial for the Georgia Tech contest and then be back for the Citadel matchup for his official visit. Among the official visits this weekend of note, USC targets Israel Mukuamu to Florida State, Joe Bulletapelli to Michigan State, Damian Lewis and C.J. Smith at Ole Miss. Dax Holyfield will be at Virginia Tech this weekend. K.J. Henry will be at Virginia Tech. Clemson targets Jordan McFadden will be also at Virginia Tech, and also Brendan Radley-Hiles to Texas as well. We told you earlier in the show about the Richard Goreja commitment. He had committed to Florida over Clemson, and also Jericho Helms, 6'7" forward, is committed to NC State over both USC and Missouri. So Helms to NC State. That is a big commitment there for the Wolfpack. Tyreek Johnson of Jacksonville, defensive back, plans to take an official to Clemson November 18th per Clemson Insider. Akeem Pauling of Ben Lippen, he'll visit Appalachian State on Saturday. He's a 2019 Class DB. Clemson in the top 6 with 2019 linebacker Marcel Brooks of Flower Mound, Texas. He has TCU, Alabama, Penn State, Ohio State, and Oklahoma as the rest of his top 6. A couple of 2019 offers. 2019 wide receiver Shamar Nash, Memphis, gets a USC offer. 2020 running back Jaquavius Marks of Atlanta, also offered by the Gamecocks. And 2019 wide receiver Ladarius Allison of York, offered by Indiana. That is recruiting for this Friday evening. Remember, you can check out all of our recruiting at hashtag ST Recruiting on Twitter, on our Sports Talk SC Twitter account. That is at Sports Talk SC. And you can also find out the latest recruiting updates at SportsTalkSC.com. Hour 1 was a hefty one. Hope you enjoyed it. We will come back for hour number 2. Remember, if you lose us at any point in time over the air, you can also check us out on our YouTube channel at SportsTalkSC.com. You can find that there. We have a posted video of our live stream there. You can find us out and have not only that, but our archive broadcasts of all of our shows that we broadcast to you here on a daily basis. And also, if you just need audio, TuneIn Radio is your best bet. 100.7, The Point Radio in Columbia, our flagship affiliate in the capital city, will basically take you the whole way. They'd never preempt us for any reason. So if you are looking for us, lose us for any reason, you can certainly utilize their services on TuneIn Radio. Coming up next, Peter Burns of SEC Network will tell us his forecast for the second half of the season for the Gamecocks, and also which team has been the biggest bounce-back effort of those in the conference. Also, Monty Dutton still to come, and a fight club at Clemson. More coming up hour 2 on Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. We're back.
Round 2 of Sports Talk up next with your hosts Phil Kornbluth, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. Don't leave us hanging. Join the show, 800-956-7266.
Hour 2 here on Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Expected father Peter Burns joins us from the SEC Network. He's carved out a little time for us here. You said that your daughter's due date is any minute now, basically.
It was so funny is whenever we found out, my wife and I found out we were expecting, I was like, surely it's coming in football season. And yes, that was the case. And then I was like, I guarantee you they're going to give us a due date on a college football Saturday. And it was 10/21. So sure enough, here we are. In the busiest time of year, we're going to have a little one. So we're excited about it. And, just one more thing, I got to keep my head on the swivel over here at work.
Well, we've basically reached, I guess, the unofficial halfway point of the college football season. Most teams have 6 or 7 games underneath their belt. Let's talk about the Gamecocks to start here, going local before we expand the picture. What are your thoughts through 7 games of this Gamecock team? Because, it looks to me like the expectations before the season were such that I think they were kind of muted. But if you look at back and see what they've done so far, you have to be at least impressed of where they've gone.
Yeah, I don't think there's a doubt. I mean, you go back and look at this team really kind of turning a corner when they decided to burn the red shirt off of Jake Bentley and kind of just gave, some light. And I think that's a credit to Will Muschamp. I think that was a credit to Jake. I think that was a credit to Bobby Bentley, running backs coach, his dad, saying, hey, let's go ahead and get this done. And sure enough, I mean, I think it kind of gave them a catapult to say, all right, well, let's try to be a little bit better next year. And yeah, I mean, sitting at what they are right now, and they had that lead against A&M. I think you look at this South Carolina team as a team that has lived up to and exceeded expectations. I mean, we talked about it on the network as far as how many schools are really exactly happy where they are. Of course, Alabama with the way that they're playing, Georgia as well, right there at the top. But listen, you still got 2 losses, but I think you're ahead of schedule. And I think they're doing it in Columbia right now, Will, with not the players that Will has envisioned yet. I think Will's going to be able to recruit. He's going to get a bunch of new guys in there, especially defensively. But this has been a team that he's been able to kind of just coach up, and that's why they've had success so far this year.
And it's very interesting, too. The defense has been something that is a very pleasant surprise. That's part of this team that basically is the youngest part of it. How impressed have you been with the way that they've been able to defend? I know the offense hasn't necessarily been as explosive as we thought it would be, but the defense was a tremendous surprise.
Yeah, I mean, when you lose Debo offensively, you knew that they were going to struggle. So I'm kind of concerned that they don't target Hayden Hurst as much as they should. But then again, I'm sure that's the topic of discussion this week.
Very much.
Yeah, defensively, I think with Will, what he's done is he knows, and I've sat with him on signing day before, been in his office, and I think, Marcus Spears and I left his office one day, and he kind of turned to me and he goes, well, Will's great at always as a coach is that he can see where the deficiencies are and how to mask those deficiencies. A lot of coaches really don't know how to do that. And I think that's what Will's done is that, hey, listen, there may be some spots that we're not solid on, especially maybe it was defensive line. He doesn't have his studs there that he wants. How can I put Sky in a good position? How can I put King on the outside, not in a bad spot. So I think that's where he's really learned to take the defensive coordinator, Will Muschamp, and put it into the head coach, Will Muschamp. And I just think Will, it's just he's one of those guys we root for at the network because he's a football coach. You don't really see too many wacky things come out of him. When you spend time with him, you kind of pull for his squad, no matter where he's at. And that's why a lot of people are excited about how this season's starting. They hope that they can finish strong down there in Columbia.
SEC Network's Peter Burns joining us here on Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network. The next 3 games, the pivotal stretch for them: Vandy, at Georgia, home Florida. What would you say is a reasonable expectation for Gamecock fans during that stretch? Can they go 2 out of 3 in that stretch?
You should. I think Vandy is struggling. When I was down there earlier before the season, I kind of looked at Derek Mason and I looked around at practice and there were 65 bodies in spring ball. I'm thinking, you just don't have enough dudes here. And I think that's what's happened. I mean, now that they've had some injuries, as you get deeper into the season. They're just flat out worn out. And I think that's where South Carolina will have an advantage in that game. I mean, Georgia's something strong right now. I mean, the way that they're playing ball defensively, they're stopping the run, they're running the ball. And as long as Jake Fromm continues, doesn't have to be a game changer. As long as he's a game manager, they're going to continue to win. So I think that's a hard game to win. And I'm not buying Florida. I didn't buy before the season. Whenever the Antonio Callaway, Jordan Scarlett news came out, I just thought that was a team in turmoil, and sure enough, they have been all season long. So, I think 2 out of 3 is a reasonable expectation that could be done. And then you're sitting there with already 7 wins, and trying to shock the world whenever you play Clemson at the end of the year.
Certainly so, and believe me, that's one that circled on everybody's minds here in the Palmetto State when you come up for that one, especially after the blowout that happened last year. Looking across the conference, you mentioned Georgia. What do you think is the secret to what's been going on with Kirby Smart's team?
No, I mean, they're using the Alabama blueprint, in which is if you play great defense and not let a team run the ball very well and have great front seven, your field positioning is going to be better. You're going to be able to run the ball. You're not going to have to take as many risks offensively, and that's what Kirby has built. I mean, there was a moment a couple of weeks ago where I watched Kirby. They're up by 1 million, it seems like, and Fromm kind of lollygags it, and he ends up being a half yard short. And Kirby just absolutely laid into Fromm. I turned to Chris Doring and Chiswick, and I was like, that's Saban. I mean, that's why Saban has done so well, is because he expects and pushes those guys to take that extra yard, to take that extra hit. But that's what we see also in Will, too.
True.
With Muschamp. I think that I think for these college kids, everybody wants to be buddy-buddy with them. And, yeah, that kind of worked for Kevin Sumlin a little bit. Dabo it works with. But there needs to be a certain amount of fear for these kids, because a lot of these kids are 5-star kids. They got 1 million different Instagram followers. They're blowing up. They're stars at Rivals and Scout.com. They're talking about them. But you've got to have a guy that's going to command their respect and tear into them when they don't. I think Kirby does that, and he'll have success. I think Nick does that at Alabama, and I think Will does that with the fair amount, that it's not over the top, but it is everything is a teaching moment, and he really pains when he can't get those guys to be just a little bit better, because he wants them to succeed. That's one of the reasons why I like Will down there so much.
You mentioned the Kevin Sumlin attitude. Both he and Ed Orgeron kind of have rescued their hot seat plate, if you will, after the perplexing early losses. They're now looking at pretty good records and pretty good bounce backs. Whose bounce back are you more surprised by?
I still want to see what happens with Ed Orgeron at LSU, not because of Ed, just because this team, a lot of people don't know how talent depleted it was. And that had a lot to do with, the athletic director at LSU, Joe Oliva, kind of leaving Les Miles hanging in the wind, and then a guy's transferring out because they don't know what's going on, and it hurt recruiting. And so I think with Orgeron, there's no doubt he has this whole year and he has all of next year. There's no doubt in my mind that that's the case. But I just think that they could struggle this week against in Oxford, because Shea Patterson can put up some numbers. For Kevin Sumlin, I think he's done a great job of kind of just getting, I don't want to hear from Facebook rants from the Border Regent guys. Just get down to, playing football.
Last one for you, Peter. That game in Fayetteville on the final weekend of the year, the final Friday of the year on Black Friday. Does the losing coach of that game between Missouri and Arkansas lose their job?
Well, it's tough. I mean, Brett really needs to go ahead and win that one. It would be great for him to go ahead and beat Auburn on Saturday night, just to kind of shock everybody. And then maybe Gus, we might be talking about that. But, with Odom, I think, there's only a $2 million buyout. They have really struggled. But you got to realize, too, 2015, 2016, there were a lot of politics that were happening in the state of Missouri. They were struggling to kind of get people to buy into that program. And Odom is a great guy, great defensive coordinator. He might be in a little bit over his head as a head coach, but I think they would be willing to give him one more year to try to figure it out.
Peter Burns, we wish you and your beloved the best of luck with the new edition coming, and thank you so much for taking some time.
Will, anytime for you, man.
SEC Network's Peter Burns, a Fight Club at Clemson, next on Sports Talk.
Sports Talk is the sports talk show of Main Street, South Carolina. From the coast to the mountains, we cover it all.
Welcome in. Hope you're all enjoying yourself on this Friday night. Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Again, it is week 9 of the high school football season, so we will have your entire high school football scoreboards tonight, 10, 10:30, and 11 on many of these same Sports Talk and South Carolina Radio Network affiliates, so be sure to be looking for that. We're going to give you our picks later on in the show. A certain member of the Sports Talk Glitterati went 5-0 last week. He bragged about it all week, and we will have to at least reveal that once again as we go throughout the evening, but certainly we'll keep you updated and entertained as far as that goes. Also want to at least touch on the games that we will have this week. And again, remember, no South Carolina and no Clemson this week. South Carolina a week from Saturday facing a very big contest with Vanderbilt on homecoming weekend at Williams-Brice, while Clemson comes home after the loss to Syracuse and faces Georgia Tech. So both of the local Power 5 teams are home next week. As for the teams elsewhere across the state that will be playing on this weekend, Coastal Carolina is at Appalachian State. South Carolina State is at Delaware State. The number 5 Wofford Terriers have Samford this week after their victory over Citadel. Citadel has lost 3 in a row. They have a chance to get back on the winning track at Tennessee Chattanooga. Furman is at Furman hosting Mercer. Check that. And Charleston Southern facing Savannah State. Newberry and Limestone will play the rivalry contest in that pairing coming up this week as well. Benedict is at Morehouse, North Greenville at Carson Newman as well. That rounds out the collegiate schedule for this week. Note from USC Upstate, 9th men's basketball coach in school history will be Kyle Perry, man, who they tabbed as the interim man. He will get himself the chance to have the big job as he takes over for Eddie Payne, who stepped down October 3rd because of health concerns. I remember Payne announcing that some health issues had kept him off the sideline and kept him from at least being able to be 100%. And entering his 9th season with the program, Perry, considered one of the top 30 assistant coaches, ready to run his own program by the website collegeinsider.com. And he'll be a part of that coming up here this year. The recruiting coordinator at Upstate as well. He's been an assistant at SC State, College of Charleston, Carson Newman, and Tennessee Tech. So plenty of experience out the state. Of course, he played his collegiate basketball at Georgia Tech for the big man, Bobby Cremens. So certainly looking forward to seeing what he can do for that particular team. Again, Clemson's ACC Media Day will come next week in Charlotte, where we'll hear from Brad Brownell during that period of time. We've already heard from Frank Martin and the players assembled with USC, with SEC Media Days taking place over the course of the last couple of days in Nashville. And I will say this, my first trip to Nashville, I will say this, I was impressed. I had a lot of fun. I don't know if I have a burning desire to go back. Just saying. I don't think I have a desire. I feel the same way about Nashville the way I feel about Las Vegas. There's just too many opportunities for people to take your money. Nashville basically revolves around the alcoholic beverages and the honky-tonks, etc. Very nice. All very nice. You just can't do it too much, in my mind. And I think, and the other thing, too, Nashville is like, I mean, and this is coming from somebody who has spent his time mostly in metropolitan cities like, Houston and New York, Washington, D.C. Complaining about a bevy of people sounds a tad disingenuous for me. Nashville's got way too many people who are there on a daily basis. And again, they're not all natives. It's basically all people who are there just because they have, a work business or recreational reason for being there. And, couldn't get a drink, couldn't, go anywhere. It was just bedlam the entire evening. We finally found the one chill place, though. It was pretty good. The Florida-Georgia Line Bar was where we had the most fun, basically. But you know what? I could see why they hold events there. They know how to handle traffic. They know how to handle a large influx of people. This Fight Club thing with Clemson, I know that Korn talked about it yesterday, and again, I keep saying Fight Club thing. I'm not saying that Clemson has a Fight Club, but the video looks like the movie The Fight Club, the Brad Pitt classic. And again, they violated the first rule of Fight Club, which is Don't talk about Fight Club. Clemson apparently released a statement basically saying that, hey, we see the video. Dabo addressed the team. It's been taken care of. But I have to sit here and honestly say this. Like, how do you let this happen, man? Like what? Like, in what universe is this okay? Like, I'm not talking about, whether it was a hazing thing or whether it was something that was done by freshmen. We don't know any details about whether or not this was done, as a one-time thing, or if this is a ritual, or if these are the boxing gloves that the cornerbacks were using in order to get themselves better at defending passes. But, when you're a college athlete at a school like Clemson, it's a job. It is your job. And part of your job is to remain healthy. Why in the world, why on God's green earth would you think that boxing and sparring during the season is a good idea? And again, like I say this as somebody who roomed with college athletes when I was at Missouri, who saw them on a regular basis. I mean, I hung with a pretty exclusive crowd. They were all Americans in my house at times, okay? But guess what? During the season, they weren't drinking Miller Lite. They weren't drinking Courvoisier or vodka. They had Gatorade bottles in their hands, and they were completely filled with Gatorade. There was no alcohol involved, at least when they were around me. That's all I can speak for. If I was a collegiate athlete in this day and age, especially somebody who was of considerable prowess, I'd be a freaking hermit. I would be in my house when I wasn't in class or the training table or the weight room. I wouldn't go out. I wouldn't talk to a soul. I wouldn't be on Twitter. You would not hear, see, speak, or know of me. There'd be no alcohol. There'd be no women. I'd be a hermit. I don't know why more of these kids don't take this initiative. They don't take this. I mean, I know you're going to have fun. Everyone wants to have their fun. I get that. And they might have thought that this was a fun little idea. Let's put the boxing gloves on and spar a little bit. First off, I have two issues. That, and then the guy who snitches. Like, what are we doing, man? Like, who posts that? It's so stupid. And I'm sitting here, I'm just looking at it, and I'm like, come on, man. What are we even doing out here? Come on. So, I have multiple problems with this. And to top it off, this video surfaces after, gasp, a loss. It's a loss. So, again, it's just so many bad optics with that. And to top that off also, coming out today, apparently the first pictures released of Dabo Swinney's house. His huge Gigundo mansion. Man. You want to talk about a guy who has built a fortress, and producer Brian Leonard, I have to give you credit for this idea, is that these schools that have these high-profile coaches with these big, huge houses, they need to build, like, they have the governor's mansion here in Columbia, and they have, I'm sure that a lot of they have chancellor's residences and stuff like that, or president's residences. They need to build a coach's residence or a coach's house, because they ain't going to be able to sell that house for Dabo. I don't know if he's necessarily going to retire at Clemson, but I can tell you right now, when that thing is put on the market, there ain't going to be a soul in the state who'll be able to afford it and all the tricked out stuff that's inside. What do you think that house goes for? 10 million? 11? Something. It'll be crazy. No one will be able to buy that house unless you have the next head coach at Clemson. It'll be Brent Venables' house when he takes over for. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding, guys. I'm kidding. Let's go to the racetrack. Monty Dutton, the full Monty on NASCAR comes your way next. Will Pelagic in for the boys. It's Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network.
Now back to Sports Talk, South Carolina's most listened to sports talk show for more than 30 years.
We head to the track now on Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Will Pelagic here with you, and it's time to check in with our friend Monty Dutton, the full Monty on NASCAR, as the NASCAR boys are in Kansas this week at Kansas Motor Speedway for the Kansas race here. And interesting, Monty, looking at this 400-mile race up ahead, the cut down to 8, of course, upcoming. What are your impressions here as we head to the Kansas side of the Kansas-Missouri border?
Well, as the playoffs diminish, you have these hard choices. You have these people who have heretofore been championship contenders who have to come through some big names, such as recent champions like Kyle Busch and Jimmy Johnson, who are likely to move on, but they can't afford a mistake. And so as this goes along, and the next segment will be even more so, it's going to get nervous because there are going to be some surprises that move ahead and some surprises that don't.
It's obvious that when you look at, Talladega kind of sits as a standalone race. There really is kind of no real flow to go from Talladega to what they have this week. It's two completely different tests.
Well, there's no flow in going from Talladega anywhere to Daytona. Anywhere except Daytona.
Yes.
Because it really is, I'd say at least a 90% likelihood that a number of people who are really competitive are going to finish way out of the money, and that some people that you don't hear very much about, such as the winner of 2 plate races this year, Ricky Stenhouse, becomes a factor. And so Talladega is by far the most unpredictable test, and it is in winning there and staying out of trouble is such almost a consequence of random selection and being fortunate that some question, whether there's a legitimacy in being there. But there is a legitimacy in that it's very interesting and it stimulates interest. And so I'd say that last week's Talladega race, with the exception of it being extreme because of it being sort of an ironic thing to say that here are the greatest drivers on earth when they look like the Keystone Cops at times. But with the exception of that, it's very interesting. And I think it's also interesting that many people who wring their hands and say, this is too dangerous, and I don't watch races to the wreck, are the same ones who get highly upset when there's a race at Talladega that doesn't have many. Right.
It's kind of an oddity there from that perspective. People kind of talking out of both sides of their mouth. Did we see Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s last real shot at a victory go by the wayside?
Probably. I think that he sort of lost his 2 best shots. I think that he had a decent chance at Dover, and but Talladega is the place where his talents are have been most in evidence over the years. He won more races there than anywhere else. So the likelihood is that was probably his last shot, but one never knows.
Certainly so. Looking at 7 through 10, those spots are separated by just 10 points. Ryan Blaney, Jimmy Johnson, Kyle Busch, Matt Kenseth. Who, in your mind, survives? Which 2 of those guys survive at the end of this weekend?
I guess with everyone, this becomes a matter of, on the one hand, who you think, and on the other hand, who you'd like to see. I would like to see Blaney advance because, to me, he's sort of maybe the most charismatic of the young drivers, he and Kyle Larson. So it'd be good for the sport. And there will be, because of the fact that he's won 7 championships and no one else has won 8, there will be both jubilation if Johnson moves ahead and national peace by fans of the great Richard Petty and the great Dale Earnhardt who don't want the drivers to be exceeded by Johnson. Kenseth is not likely to make many mistakes. My pick. I think that the most likely to have are Kyle Busch and Kendall. And I think we might as well get on the subject of my pick. By the way, last week when we had a snafu, I really did pick the guy who won the race last week. But I can't. But anyway, I think that this is just the type race that Kyle Busch responds to. So he'd be my pick to win. And I think he and his teammate Singer are the most likely to advance. I sort of hope the other two do.
Yeah, I was at Syracuse when you made your pick last week, Monty, so I wouldn't have known whether you picked or not, or who you picked or not.
I had it written down on a sheet of paper. I think I even recorded. I think I even recorded it on social media. So.
Well, I'm glad that you feel vindicated in that one. We talked with Monty Dutton here from NASCAR here on our, of course, usual Friday visit here on Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. You know, Brad Keselowski with that victory gets a nice big boost, a nice big move up. Do you think? I mean, this is obviously very subjective. I mean, you're making your pick obviously the way it was. Do you think that we could see a new leader by the end of the weekend?
Well, I mean, the way it is, there's kind of a difficult delineation because the people, if there's a new winner, that person will advance. But if either Martin Truex or Keselowski win this weekend, then it creates more opportunities to advance by points. I am happy that I think Keselowski is a real championship contender, but I think he's a slight performance disadvantage. But I really think that of the drivers right now, in terms of the prime of their career, skill on the racetrack, and effectiveness at coping with stress, I think that Keselowski probably has it all more than anybody around right now. That this is the place and time where he is at his most effective. But I don't think that he is as fast on a week-in, week-out basis as the Toyotas of Busch and Truex and the Chevrolet of Kyle Larson. But I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't pull it out.
Yeah, it's weird. We saw all that Toyota magic earlier. Now we're starting to see some Fords and Chevy in the mix. I'll ask you the same thing the same thing that I asked you when we last talked. Have the others cracked the code that Toyota seemed to have cracked earlier?
In my opinion, no, because Talladega is irrelevant.
True.
Actually, the fact is Ford's have won the last 5 races at Talladega. But the whole balance of power is different on the plate tracks, where the air means as much as horsepower, and aerodynamics is the more important issue. And being able to operate an aerodynamic draft is sort of like high-speed Tetris as much as it is racing.
Is there one driver that these last 5 tracks fits perfectly for? I know that's a lot of different tracks, but is there one driver who you think their racing style fits these last 5 tracks the best?
Well, the keys to the kingdom are on intermediate tracks. And Kansas is this weekend, and that's the type of track that Finale at Homestead is, and that's the type of track that Texas is. So I think there are other races. I think that, let's just say we know Truex and Kyle Busch are going to be factors at those. Mm-hmm. Maybe this year the key to the kingdom is going to be who does well on the flat tracks of Martinsville and Phoenix, Arizona. And, the most likely person to win the championship is a driver who is excellent at every kind of track. And that's certainly true of Kyle Busch. And so I don't know. Kyle Busch is just other drivers. It's a battle between them and others. Kyle Busch is sort of a battle between himself. He probably has more. Yeah, I've always thought this comparison of Kyle Busch and Jimmy Johnson. Kyle Busch amazes people at how excellent he is at saving in the car. Jimmy Johnson is amazing for seldom having to.
Monty, we're out of time. Enjoy the weekend. Thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate you having me, as always.
That's Monty Dutton joining us. The full Monty on NASCAR is, again, the NASCAR Monster Energy Series heads to Kansas. We're back to wrap up the week when we return on Sports Talk.
The guys are always checking email. Send your comments or questions to talkback@sportstalksc.com. Now, more of Sports Talk from Columbia's Main Street.
Final segment of the program, final segment of the week. You know what? This is an oddity. We were talking about this during the break. We don't get many of these in our profession. We don't get many combined bye weeks, especially in this particular profession where we cover principally, at least when it comes to the travel, two big schools that have a bye week that they share. So Corn, of course, taking in a wedding this weekend. I might golf. Don't know. Maybe I'll just, kind of lay low and not do really anything, but it's going to be a very interesting situation for all of us here on Sports Talk. Again, there are a couple of games also across the state to take in as well. Very big one in the Midlands tonight that we'll be keeping an eye on. And again, as we said, we will have our high school sports report coming up tonight at 10 o'clock. Of course, be sure to check out SportsTalkSC.com for all the recruiting stuff as well. We talked about Jericho Helms. We talked also about him committing to NC State. And also we talked about Richard Garija of he'll be going to Florida instead of Clemson. Sports Talk brought to you by the South Carolina soybean farmers and their checkoff. Learn more at scsoybeans.org. Pork powered by soy. The next 3 weeks for both South Carolina and Clemson will really tell the story of how the rest of the season will go. Take out the penultimate week when Wofford and Citadel are the opponents, and also throw out the final week of the season because obviously we know the way basically we know the magnitude of that game. There's no need to build that up at this point before we at least go through the next 3 weeks. For the Georgia Tech contest for Clemson, Brett Venables knows how to defend this offense. But here's the issue for me. I'm wondering if we'll see some of the wrinkles from Georgia Tech that we saw in the Tennessee contest in that second half that made them successful, and the ability to throw the football kind of sporadically a little bit there. There's a lot from Georgia Tech, and we know they're going to run the option. There's no two ways about it. We know that Clemson knows how to defend the option. But I'm very, very curious to see how the response is off of that, not only off week, but also off of the loss to Syracuse. I think, interestingly enough, and I believe it was Governor Hodges who said this earlier on the show, it's all about Kelly Bryant, whether or not he's able to make that comeback and look like a representative quarterback. And, I know a lot of people kind of got on me for, quote, calling out Dabo or, questioning his decision-making. Look, you can't sit here and tell me that he was a right man during that game. And we'll have no way of knowing whether or not he is a right man until we see him on the field on a week from Saturday. There's obviously going to be an increased amount of pressure on him. I think Syracuse provided a bit of a blueprint for the rest of the nation on how to really get pressure. It's come through the middle. The two guard positions have been, I would say, lesser than stellar with those two, and right tackle as well. I think, and also when Travis Etienne is in there and they're forced to pass, basically there were a couple of blocks in that Syracuse game where he just completely whiffed. And from Clemson's perspective, you need to shore up those areas over the course of this week off, and you need to do it fast. Conversely, for South Carolina, you need to play a full game of offensive football, man. I mean, that's I feel tired of saying it, and I feel like it sounds like we're picking on them because again, this is a 5-2 ball club. It's a 5-2 ball club, and if things hold, and Kentucky does lose a couple of games that they're not favored in, like the one they have this week against Mississippi State, I'm picking Kentucky to win it outright, but they're a 12-point dog and they're going on the road. That's not a that's not an easy task for them. So if they lose that game and they lose again, and South Carolina, maybe pulls up an upset at Georgia or whatever, we're talking about a much different situation in the SEC East now. So, in my view, looking at this particular situation, There are a lot of things that can go South Carolina's way in these next 3 weeks that could really change the scope of where you thought this season was and where the season could go. I'm not sitting here and saying that they do so much as control their own destiny. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here. But they have an amazing opportunity here in these next 3 weeks. Think about the way the conversation went with Clemson, or with South Carolina, rather, after that A&M game. People were wanting to fire Kurt Roper. People were wanting, the blood was out, especially after Kentucky's loss, the missed opportunity there, and also the loss to Texas A&M. Both games I was at. It's funny. Corn and I were talking about this earlier today. I've been at all 3 of the losses for Clemson and South Carolina. He's blaming me. Okay? He's blaming me, which is kind of stupid. But what I will say is this. The common thread in all those losses for both teams, inconsistency. And it wasn't necessarily anything that the opponent did other than the fact that they were given the opportunity by both South Carolina and Clemson. Clemson let Syracuse hang around in that football game and did not capitalize on situations that were tailor-made for them. They had the ball deep, couldn't score. They had field goal opportunities that should have been converted, didn't score. And they had opportunities on defense as well. So, in my view, that was a game that still hung in the balance and was able to be won by Syracuse. Kentucky game able to be won by South Carolina. They had the football, chance to take the lead, couldn't do it. Same thing went, and an A&M game, they had a lead in the fourth quarter, blew it, couldn't get off the field. Plenty of opportunities for both of those teams to have turned those L's into W's. Vanderbilt, Georgia, Florida. There's no reason that South Carolina can't go 2-1 in that stretch. Absolutely no reason they can't go 2-1 on that stretch. Florida, I'm not going to say they're putrid, but Florida is about as inconsistent a team as there is in college football right now. And you cannot trust Felipe Franks, quarterback, and you get that game at home. That'll be a sellout. No matter what happens in the next 2 weeks, that'll be a sellout. Florida will bring their fans. There should be a lot of black and garnet in the stands. So you'll have basically everything stacked in your favor in order to try and get that victory under your belt. And here's the thing that happens in college football more than any other sport, other than maybe college hoops. You have the ability with home field advantage to stack the deck as much as you possible in your favor. So there's going to be basically a tailor-made environment for South Carolina to succeed. You'll have a loud crowd on defense, quiet crowd on offense, and oh, by the way, question marks all over the field for Florida. The only question mark right now for South Carolina is, can this offense play a full game from snap one to the final snap of the fourth quarter? They've had great second halves. Great second half against Missouri. Great second half against Tennessee. Amazing second half against Arkansas. Can you do it for 4 quarters? If you do that against Vanderbilt, maybe get some encouraging signs out of the Georgia game. You get that against Florida. You get 3 wins in the next 4 weeks. There'll be people who will be talking about that game against Clemson with a lot more optimism that it's bound by things that aren't just, blind hope. Not saying that it can happen, but it'll be a lot closer than I think people even before the season thought it could be. But then again, that's why they play the games, folks. Hope you enjoyed the show today. Again, we will be back with you at 10 o'clock, 10:30, and 11 for the high school scoreboard. David Shelton will join us as well. We'll give you all the scores, more scores than any station, network, or entity in the entire state of South Carolina in a 5-minute span can do. We'll be back on Monday. Don't forget, we'll have Corn back in the saddle at 6 o'clock Monday evening. We'll have the teleconference from Will Muschamp to talk about, and also a couple big games as the second half begins in earnest in college football for both the Gamecocks and the Tigers. For producer Brian Leonard, I'm Will Pelagic saying so long, and thanks for listening. Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network.